Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hello and welcome to Families from As-Suffah Academy. My name is Michael Abraham. If you don't know me, I will be working with As-Suffah Academy this year as an instructional specialist and also working with As-Suffah Academy to expand their educational capacity in all areas, including trying to increase the revenue that As-Suffah Academy has available to it. And that's why I'm talking to you guys today about this Minnesota language survey that the school is asking you guys to fill out. Some of you have filled it out already, mashallah, but I just want to make sure everyone is informed of what this is, what results from you filling it out, and how it benefits both the school and your child. So I'm sure all of you are aware that funding is a challenge for private schools, of course, in Minnesota. Minnesota does not have a voucher system. They don't give families money to help pay for tuition. For private schools, As-Suffah Academy, mashallah, they try to keep the tuition very, very affordable. Now, despite that, that does not mean that there is not some public money that is available to private schools in Minnesota. There is public money that is available, especially from the federal government, and that money is given to private schools through the local school district, which in the case of As-Suffah Academy is Spring Lake Park. Now, in order to get a lot of those funds, you need paperwork and we need documentation on the families. So you might find that the school is asking you for an increase in that. Some of the funds that can be made available to As-Suffah Academy is funds for ESL services for any student who qualifies for it, just the same pretty much as the school districts have it, because a good portion of that money comes from the federal government. And in order to get those funds for students who qualify, there's a process that the families and the student has to go through essentially that is defined by Minnesota state law. And the first step in that process is for the families to figure out what you see here, which is called the Minnesota Language Survey. Now, some of you might be saying, you might be thinking, well, my child's first language is English. My child doesn't need ESL services. Just hold up on that yet. Because actually, this is why I'm making the video, to explain how these systems work in our education system. Because it's actually the case that speaking English as your first language does not necessarily mean that a child does not qualify for ESL funds. Also, too, at As-Suffah Academy, if your child does qualify for ESL services, that is not going to change the way they are educated at all at As-Suffah Academy. They're not going to be put into special classes or anything. They're not going to be pulled out from any other classes or anything like that, because language learning is already rolled into the academics at As-Suffah, and it will be delivered that way. And actually, As-Suffah has a lot of flexibility with how they want to deliver such programming because it is a private school. But that doesn't mean that the school and that your child don't have a right to the funds that are available. So in the system of the state of Minnesota, it begins with families filling out this survey, which we've put into a Google form here for your convenience. And it is based off of a form from the state that looks like this that I'll use to talk about it. So you see there's 4 sections to this form that asks you about language, your child's experience with language essentially growing up. And then there's 3 different choices for it, whether they've been exposed to languages other than English or English and another language or only English. Okay. Please answer this as honestly as you can. And if your child has grown up in a home where the parents were speaking a language other than English, or they were heavily exposed to a language other than English or exposed to it on a regular basis, then in at least one of these categories, you're probably going to check something other than English. So then in that right-hand column, you indicate the language that they have been exposed to. And on the form, there is a section for that after each question. Please fill that out honestly. So now, so everyone knows what happens when you fill that out. Filling out the survey does not make your child an ESL student or not. But if there is any section here for where the child's experience has not been only English, that will make your child qualify for being evaluated for ESL services, which means that they will be given an assessment to see whether they test into ESL services. Now, just so you know, most students in the state of Minnesota and actually in the country who qualify as an ESL student, they're actually a student that if you ask them, they would say English is their first language and they think in English. And some of them, they don't even know the language of their parents. Speaking English only isn't, it's ironic because of the name of the field, but speaking English only doesn't actually disqualify you from being an ESL student. Why is this? This is based on research that has shown that students who grow up in homes that are multilingual, even if English has a prominent part in it, and even if they learned English from the older siblings or they got a lot of it from media and they speak English fluently, students who grow up in a multilingual environment, when they arrive at kindergarten and they arrive at school, this is known from very long range research that's done, they do not have as high a vocabulary development and exposure as children who grow up in English only speaking households. Now, does that mean that if English is not your first language as a parent, that you should only speak English with your child? No, it does not mean that. There's much better long-term benefits for children growing up multilingual. And actually, children who grow up with parents who speak a different language than English as their first language, it's actually shown in research that the stronger that child is in their parents' home language, the better they become in language overall and in learning overall as they get older. So it's actually good for your child to develop the home language. But when they are young, it does have an effect of them having a limited vocabulary development compared to children who grow up in monolingual homes or English only speaking homes. So that is why they're given, and it's based on that research that this survey is designed to uncover any child who had that experience, even if English is their first language or the language they speak the most. And then they're given an assessment to see where their level of English is, especially in academic language. And then if they don't test above a certain level on that test, they'll qualify for English services. Now, it's important to understand what that test is testing what you call academic language, meaning language that is used in academic subjects in school. It is not testing for social language. And again, most of the ESL students in the state of Minnesota, most of the students who qualify for ESL services, they're proficient in social language, but they don't test high enough in academic language to disqualify them from services. So how this will work is any student at As-Suffah who the parent fills this out, and for one of the boxes, something other than English only is checked, and be honest with the survey, that will open them up for either As-Suffah or the local school district to come in and give them an assessment. And then if they score above a certain level on that assessment, they won't be a student. But if they score below a certain level, they will qualify to be labeled ESL. And then if you agree with that, for every student who qualifies that way, it will open up the chance for As-Suffah to receive extra money for those students. And that will help As-Suffah retain teachers. It will help them pay teachers. It will help them use funds that they're using now for teachers on other areas. It will help in the school's expansion overall very, very much. Now do know as a parent, even if you have a child who qualifies for ESL services through this survey and through testing, you still have a right to have them not get ESL services if you want. You have a right to opt them out of that at any time. At As-Suffah, that's not really going to make sense because it won't change the way your child is educated at all if they qualify for ESL services. But if you take your child out of As-Suffah, what we can do, we can have you sign the form that opts them out of ESL services. So that way in their records, it shows that you opted out of it. And then if you bring your child to a new school in the state of Minnesota, when we transfer information to that school, when they ask for records from the previous school, it can show that they were opted out of ESL services. If you want that, we can do that, no problem. So if there's any questions about this, you can refer to Muhyiddin. He can forward it to myself, or you can reach out to me directly. My email can be shared with you, and we can explain this more. But just please take the time to fill out the survey. Fill it out honestly. It will result, if you check something other than only English, it will result in your child being given a short test at the beginning of the school year. And then if they score below a certain level on that test, which is an authentic assessment, it is an assessment that gives a good real level of where their academic language is, that will open up the school to receive more funds to help support that student. And so thank you very much. And may Allah bless all of you.